Welcome, welcome. Good day. And today we are having our first live episode, Tell a Story Hive, live on location with Mimi and Bowen. Bowen's behind the camera today. I'm Mimi. And we are at the studio, beautiful studio of Christine Kashuba. And really happy to be here with you. Thank you so much for welcoming us in.
I'm always happy to have people come to my studio.
Oh, good. Well, then we'll be dropping by more often.
Okay.
Now that we know where you are, perched on this beautiful hill, if I could just describe it to the viewers, and perhaps later in the episode we'll be able to share with them this gorgeous view of Swan Lake and the hills behind. It's a very inspirational place.
It is.
Yeah. So Christine Kashuba, wow, there's lots of titles, lots of hats that you've worn over the years. Artist and facilitator, educator, mother, grandmother.
All of those.
All of those.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about when I first met you or heard about you was when you were at the Mackey Lake House in Coldstream, and I believe you were there for 8 or 9 years. So I thought we could start maybe at that place.
Sure.
If you don't mind, if you could share, what Mackey House was for you and explain to the viewers, what that time was like.
Sure. So I started working at Mackey Lake House and really didn't know anything much about it. I did some research before I went for the interview so I wouldn't appear to be totally incompetent.
Yeah.
And it was very fun because we had lived in Vernon all of our lives, and Coldstream is attached to Vernon, but is a very unique place. It is its own place. It's not an extension of Vernon. And so I got to know that. So Mackey House itself is a house that was built in 1910. And actually there's just been a book published about it, so you might not have known that. But
Fantastic.
There's a book that tells you all the history of the 3 families that lived in the house. And the best thing I think about the house is that it was never really renovated. So all of the wood on the walls and the furnishings and the wooden floors are all original. And so if somebody goes for a visit to Mackey House, they're actually seeing the same things that somebody visiting in 1910 would have seen.
Right. And I just have to ask, because you say there were 3 families that lived in that house, and I'm only aware of Paddy Mackey and his story. So is that those other families were before Paddy?
Yeah, so the family that actually built the house came from back east, and in 1910 they built the house, and it was the Buchanan family. And they had come from a banking background and came out to kind of make their way in Western Canada. And the reason they chose the property that the Mackey House is on is because her siblings, lived next door in a house that was called Orchardly Lodge. And side note to that is Orchardly Lodge was the first hotel for Silver Star. So that, like a little bit of
rich in history.
Yeah, a little bit of history.
Yeah.
Side notes.
Is it also connected then with the Sovereign House?
The Sovereign House is next door. It was built around the same time, or maybe a little bit before. The original Sovereign House, I think, was built in 1904, and then added on a bunch of times. So very different from the Mackey House in that it kind of was an add-on and an add-on and an add-on. A bit of a rabbit warren.
Right.
Like compared to the Mackey House, which was designed by the Buchanans. They had a really well-known architect, Robert Finley, designed the house. He designed it in arts and crafts style, but with a twist, a chateau roof. So it's not a typical roof for an arts and crafts style house. And lots of other little touches within the house. And the story goes that Mr. Buchanan was quite determined that his house would be spectacular and that there would be no problems in his house. And so after his day of work, he would go back to where they were constructing the house, and he would walk around. And if there was something he found that he didn't like, he would take his little hatchet to it and make sure they had to take it out and redo that section. So it was well built, and it's a beautiful house. And so it was a pleasure to work there and then to get to know the story. So the Buchanans came first. They lived there for 15 years. Then they moved to Vancouver. They had a house in Shaughnessy, and they moved to Vancouver and lived there. They had sold it to the Leighton family, who came from England. Mr. Leighton had some lung issues, and so needed a drier climate. And so either the options were South Africa or the Okanagan. So they came to the Okanagan, and they lived in the house for 15 years. And the Leighton family were famous or infamous too because their daughter, Elizabeth, actually worked for Churchill as one of his private secretaries during the war. And she also wrote a book about that. It's called, I think it's just called Mr. Churchill's Secretary, but not the newer version, the one by Elizabeth Leighton. You have to
Okay,
find.
I will look that up.
Anyway, so she did that, and then the Leightons and the Mackeys were really good friends. So the Leightons had a son that went to the boys' school that the Mackeys ran, and they became really good friends. And at one point, Patty said if there was ever a house that he could, live in or buy or whatever, that would be the Mackey house, which we know is the Mackey house.
Right. And just for everyone to know as well, I've been in the Mackey house, and you can really feel the energy, the spirits I guess of Patty. I don't know. Maybe I'm jumping too far ahead, but it's a really rich feeling wandering through this home.
Yeah, and I always felt warm and welcomed there. It's interesting. It's got a full basement. It's got 2 floors and a full attic. So a house built in 1910 that has 3 washrooms in it is also kind of unusual. But yeah, so the Mackeys came to buy the house from the Leightons, and they had run the boys' school in Coldstream for a long time and were looking to retire. So that's when they bought the lake house, which we now know as the Mackey Lake House.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And then it was managed by Patty. As his parents aged and passed away, then it became his responsibility.
And he was a real patron of the arts, from what I heard.
Yeah, people called him a Renaissance man. He loved all kinds of things. He's responsible or partially responsible for Cal Park being named Cal Park or being preserved as Cal Park. He was involved in the music school and in art groups and the museum and the archives and just generally engaged with people. And then,
can I just ask, was this around the same time that Sveva Katani, another artist with a lot of history in Vernon?
So there's another whole story. We could go down that rabbit hole too. But Sveva and Patty were friends.
Okay.
And so they both were artists. And the third person that was, the 3 of them that were friends was Joan Harriet, Sveva Kaitani, and Patty Mackey. And so, so they painted together, and Patty helped pay for Sveva's schooling, for her to go to school in Victoria when she went to do that to get her teacher's degree. And so there are lots of stories. They played Scrabble together, many hours of Scrabble, and I think there's similarities and differences between the 2 of them. Their family, obviously the Mackey family came from England, so they have a different background than the Kaitani family that came from Italy.
Right.
So, and I guess Patty's family came from a religious kind of family, very, I wouldn't say strict, but kind of, very by the book. And I think the Kaitanis, Mr. Kaitani ran away to Canada with Sveva's mom. So,
right, and you're
differences
right.
there.
There's a lot of rich storytelling that we could dive into. Do you know how Patty came to the decision to bequeath his home, the Mackey house, to the district of Coldstream, or to?
No, he actually really considered what would happen to the house, because he never married, he never had kids. His brothers had died in the war, so there were no other siblings, and so he was really concerned that the house would stay in its entirety as the house, because he loved the house and he thought it was very rich in history and heritage. And so he actually formed a foundation. I think it was 6 years before he died. He formed the foundation. He actually worked with the first board of directors, and so there was some real input into what the direction of the place would be. And so then when he passed away, the board of directors carried on with that vision. And when I started working there were still 3 people on the board who knew Patty. And so that was really great for me, because then I had their input and perspective and the knowledge, about Patty.
So while you were there, was your title the manager?
Yeah, I was the manager.
Were you then given the freedom to create programming and decide what kind of events were going to happen? Or?
Yes and no. Yes, to a degree. I had a kind of free reign, but only in that, as a heritage site, it has a book that was created by to give direction. So it's got it would be like a manual, a how-to manual kind of. And so within there were suggested activities that would line up with the house. So graffiti on the lawn, no. Tea in the veranda, yes. So,
Makes sense.
Don Luxton was the architect that came up and worked with the first boards to help set that all up and to really give clear guidance, even to things like the colors, like if you're going to repaint the exterior of the house, what colors would be good, or, because it was arts and crafts style, like what does that really mean and why should you value the things that are in the house. And then the house itself had a really eclectic mix of things that the Mackeys had accumulated over their lifetime. And as their neighbors were like, oh, I hate that garish picture with that big gold frame, the Mackeys would value, oh, I know that was an artist that, was from the 1600s or something. And so some of those would come to the house as, the neighbors got rid of things or whatever. Right. There's a story about Grace Mackey going down to Jake's Jewelers, which in Vernon was a well-known jewelry store on Main Street, and rescuing a set of silverware, a silver tea set that was going to be melted down because it was really ornate and people didn't want that anymore. And so she rescued it from being turned into a puddle of silver.
Wow. And these things are curated throughout the house, aren't they? Or is there a certain room upstairs I'm remembering?
Yeah, the whole house is really curated. So within every room of the house, there's things that are artifacts. But it's kind of, I like to call it a living museum because we actually invited people in to sit on the couches and to eat at the table and those kind of things, which most museums don't do. Right? So.
Yeah, you had a real experience while you were there. On a personal note, do you have any favorite memories of certain projects that you worked on, or?
Oh, there's so many, but we don't have all day. So the few that I really loved was when we did the first teas on the veranda, and the people that were catering did a little like a dinner show. They acted out the characters of Grace Mackey and the little neighbor girl down the road, and kind of made it so that the story of the Mackey house was incorporated into having the tea. And so that was really fun. So I would say that would be one. And I think the other part would be on the property there's also kind of a wild, they call it Filton Forest. And so the other part would be just how that was preserved, and that the kids, school kids, can come and experience nature and learn about all the things in the Joan Harriet Center, which is got all kinds of collections of well-preserved birds and beaks and even bear scat. You never know what you're going to find up there.
Now, was this Sharon Lawrence that put this together? Yeah,
Sharon was the kind of push behind that. And it's been great because it gives kids an opportunity to come, the paths meander through it, and they can experience nature at their level or whatever, at their pace. There we go.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing those. I'm just thinking about, there were also artist residencies that took place there, and
so
what's your experience with that?
Yeah, so that was something else that Patty, I think, really had a vision for. And so people could come as artists in residence, they could stay in the house, and as after the first few years I was there, we had a partnership forum with the Vernon Public Art Gallery. And so the Public Art Gallery would offer an exhibition space, which we didn't have at the Mackey House. So the artists would come, stay and work at the Mackey House, and then exhibit at the gallery. So they had a month to produce work that then would be exhibited at the gallery. So they have an opening and a whole show. So that was really great. And
Right. And how long would the artists usually stay?
A month.
Oh,
they stayed a month.
For 1 month. Okay.
Yeah. And when I first started working there was also a writer's residence. And so writers would come and stay in the house and write. And it was when John Lent was in the head of the dean of the English department at OC. And how that would work is people would come, stay at the house, start their book, and then they would go away for a year and send it to OC, who at that time was publishing softcover books. And so OC would publish it, then they'd come back the next year and have like a launch of the book and introduce the next writer. And so that went on until I think about I think about the 6th year I was there, and then that kind of just came naturally to an end. John was no longer in charge, and it just had different focus because they started to produce chapbooks and small zines and things like that. So instead of doing the actual published like kind of novel.
Did I see you there the other evening? There was a celebration of John Lent and Jude
No,
Clark's work.
I wish I could have been there. I couldn't go that day, but yeah I really was there in spirit.
Right, of course. So I have a wondering then about your decision to actually go and do your own artist in residence in Texas. I don't know if I can make that jump, or if there were a few steps in between, or had you been on other artist residencies before yourself?
No, but it's something I always thought would be really fun, and I always watched my artist friends who did that, and I thought, oh, if I ever get the opportunity, I want to do that. So once I retired from Mackey House, there kind of was the opportunity to spend more time kind of doing my art and kind of exploring what I might like to do. And so we went for a visit to, our son lives in Amarillo, Texas. And so I thought, I'll just look around here and see if there's any artist residencies. I thought, maybe there's one in Santa Fe or Oklahoma City or somewhere, Denver, somewhere relatively close to where they're living. And to my surprise, they had one in Amarillo. And so that's what I did. I applied for that residency. It was actually a year-long residency, and I wrote them back and said, I really can't do a year. How about, can I do 3 months?
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. So
does it usually vary? Like you were saying, Mackey House is 1 month, whereas there it was usually a year, but you could put in a request for 3 months. So is there a standard at all for these residencies? Or?
No, each artist residency is kind of connected to the place and the gallery or the organization or wherever it's being offered. And some artist residencies require you to pay to go and be the artist in residence. Others pay you a stipend or an honorarium. So at Mackey House, they offered an honorarium to help cover travel costs. Okay. And then other places, they require you to pay.
Right. So Bowen, are you paying attention to this? Because that's maybe something Bowen hasn't explored as a, up-and-coming filmmaker.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of places that you can go to kind of get some practical experience, right? So the thing I found the most fascinating, or one of the things, was that they had taken an old shopping mall that was not very functional as a shopping mall anymore, and turned it into an art center. So each storefront was an artist studio. And it was fabulous. So it was the brainchild of the lady, a lady and her husband who owned the mall. And when she passed away, she left the legacy of that for them to do it. So there was 21 artists and 16 studios.
And that sounds big to me.
It
was because they had this space, they were able to go that large scale.
And so it'd be like taking the Village Green Mall here in Vernon, and then adding on the art center on the end of it. And so they called it the school, which was the Amarillo Arts Institute. And so there was a painting studio with 30 easels set up all the time. There was a glass studio where they blew glass and did fused glass. There was a huge clay studio. There was a weaving studio that had probably 8 or 10 large-sized weaving looms set up all the time. And then there was a kids section, a teaching section, and I probably missed some things. But so the school part of it was that. Wow. And then it was attached to the artist studios, and then there was also I guess might have been the food court or something originally. So this big space that then people could rent for events and activities and that sort of thing.
Okay, this makes me very excited to think that maybe one day Vernon could have something like this.
Yeah,
and you're going to be that person to make it happen, Christine. I get the sense.
Well, I don't know. I don't know enough shopping mall.
Well, I know you're going to tell us about the art stroll coming up, but
yeah.
I'm just thinking, what's the size of Amarillo?
Amarillo?
And it's not Amarillo.
No, it's Amarillo.
Amarillo.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Like what's
Vernon, I think it's about
40,000?
It's about Kelowna size.
Okay, Kelowna size. So we're not that far off.
No, and so it's a bit more rural in that sense, that it has kind of a background of ranching and buffalo. Right. Buffalo are a big deal in Amarillo because there was a fellow and his wife who had a ranch, and he was interested in breeding the buffalo with the cows to make them more hardy.
Okay.
And she was interested in rescuing the calves that got left behind because at that time people were rounding up buffalo and just wholesale killing them. So she rescued some calves and talked her husband into letting her raise these calves. And they formed a herd that then helped repopulate places all over the U.S. and Canada that needed buffalo now, right? So that where there had been buffalo and the buffalo were extinct, or they needed new lines to come in to make the buffalo herds healthy, that kind of thing. So buffalo is a big thing in Amarillo. So I actually, one of the things I did was I went to a place called the Herd Store, and the Herd Store was all kinds of really fascinating Wild West kind of stuff in it. Like you could get a buffalo coat, or you could get a pair of leather boots. But I got a buffalo skull. And so I took the skull and I scrubbed it down really well. And
At your son's house?
yeah, at my son's house in the front yard with the hose. My granddaughter drew a picture of this. And then let it dry, and then proceeded to do a cyanotype on the skull. And so this wasn't the first skull I had done. Now this sounds really bad. But, my niece works on a ranch in Alberta. And before she went to work on the ranch, she called it a cow catastrophe, where they had a big bone pile because the cows had died because of whatever, I don't know. And so she had asked me, hey, can you do a cyanotype on bone? And I'm like, I don't know, I've never tried that. But if you send me a bone, I'll try it and we'll see what happens.
So just to interrupt for a moment, maybe you could explain briefly what a cyanotype is so that we can connect that with the story.
Sure. A cyanotype is a very old process from the 1800s. It's pre-black and white photography, and it was developed by a guy named Sir John Henschel. And they were looking for ways to do photography and to reproduce, like for scientists to reproduce their notes. So the process became what we know as a blueprint. So house blueprints originally were this process. So it always produces a blue and white image. And so he developed it, and then it was really made famous by a lady named Anna Atkins. And I think I really like that part of the story because I suspect that in the late 1800s, she was not recognized as a scientist in her own right, but she could produce a book. And so she produced this book that had, I think it was 40 plates, something like that. So the botanical would be on one side, produced in a blue and white cyanotype, and the text, the Latin name, all the things about the plant would be on the other side. And so she produced this book, and that really helped to make that process really well known. Mm-hmm. So I didn't do anything that exciting, but
Well, so now we're going to connect that with a skull of a buffalo.
Yes. So this process, this blue and white process, is you take two chemicals, you mix them together, it makes them light sensitive. When they're light sensitive, you paint it onto any porous thing. So I typically use fabric, but it can be fabric, it can be paper, it can be bone, it can be wood, it can be anything that will absorb some of the chemical. And then you let it dry overnight, and the next day you take it out in the sun with a sandwich. So you have your prepared fabric, paper, bone, whatever, and whatever you're going to want to have on top of it. So it might be botanicals, it might be a photograph that you've printed onto a transparency, it might be painting on glass, and wherever the sun hits your package, when you take it out in the sun, wherever the sun hits it, it turns blue. But wherever it's blocked, it stays white or light. And so that's how you produce the images. So on the bone, I painted the stuff on the bone, let it dry. It's really tricky to try to figure out how much, because it's different than fabric. You know, you can tell when fabric is coated. Mm-hmm. With the bone, not so much. So then I put on the buffalo head, I put the map of Texas, and I put some like plants that were native to there, whatever, took it out, exposed it in the sun. And then the second part of it is you have to wash away all the chemicals that you didn't want, that you didn't develop, and that you don't want. Because if you leave them there, it'll just turn solid blue.
Right. And I'm just thinking about, you're doing this with your granddaughter, mm-hmm. who was how old at the time?
7.
So she can actively participate in this.
Yeah, she was really good with the hose. So we washed down the head and soaked it. Then I put it had a big tub and I soaked it in the tub for a while. And
Yeah. Did she also collect some of the image things that were going to be in the image, or that was
no,
you were
I
the
think-
artist on this? You were the lead, so
yeah, I can't remember if we went around the yard and gathered some things together. I can't remember that part.
anyways, yeah.
But she did help me with quite a lot of
Yeah, well,
plant
the hose
collection and no, we did gather some other things for other things I did. Like I did little mini cards and things like that. So we went around the yard and found the little mini plants. And because my idea when I was in Texas is I wanted to make art with stuff that was native to there. So I didn't want to make stuff, with Gerber daisies or something that, might be just generic anywhere.
Yeah.
So all of the things I found that nearly all of the plants where I was are prickly. And so in order to create art with them, I had to learn how to deal with all the prickles.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the
It's a thing.
first thing I did, I had prickles everywhere. So the prickly pear, I got a blowtorch and burnt off the back of them, because apparently that's what the farmers do. If they want to feed prickly pear to their cows, they burn off all the prickles and then the cows can eat the prickly pear. So equipped with that knowledge, I burned off the back, leaving enough on the front so that the prickles would still show when I exposed it. So but that was prickly. Tumbleweed was prickly. They had all different kinds of grasses and things, but they mostly were all prickly. So I had a pair of trusty kitchen tongs and tweezers, and I was equipped. I was good. So the buffalo skull was just one of the things that I produced there, but I produced other artwork. And then because when you're an artist in residence, it's kind of like you're transported, kind of like being on a holiday, and you debate, what am I going to bring home after, right? So I was conscious of, I don't want to create a bunch of artwork, big artwork for the wall, that then what am I going to do after? How am I going to navigate that, to bring framed stuff back?
That's a good point.
There's a bunch of paperwork if you get over $1,000 amount value. So there was all this things that were in my mind about, okay, I don't want to do that. So what else can I do? So then I started doing wearable art. So wearable art, baseball caps, bags, that sort of thing. And that really...
It's very practical.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It was practical, and then people could have art that they could wear every day.
It's purchasable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about, you're doing this artist residency, and you've described this really amazing experience you did that at your son's house with the buffalo skull, but you were living in the residency you were at your
I was
son's
living at my son's house, and it was about a 20-minute drive to where the
okay. Was that an option for you to live there?
No,
or?
it was really designed as a place to exhibit and to create your work. So it didn't really have a place of common. No,
okay.
But it did have a sink with water. So I should back up a little and tell you that, as all renovations go, as they were renovating this space, it was supposed to be done in January, and I wasn't going till April. But when I got there in April, it still had things that weren't done. I didn't have a sink in my little area. And, I would arrive on a day, and there would be a ladder going up into the ceiling, or there would be electricians pulling wire, or those kind of things. So that first month of April, there was quite a lot of that as they were trying to finish it. So it really wouldn't have been a good place for somebody to try to stay on the best of days. So,
right.
but it's a fabulous place.
Sure. And was there, and sorry to cut you off, was there an expectation that you had to produce a show at the end of your time there?
No, it wasn't so much that, but it was more that you participated in the life of the place. So they had First Fridays. So first, we'll get there.
Okay,
so the first Friday was a known art event night, and everybody knew, and everybody came. And so that was one of the expectations, that you participated in the first Friday events, and then any other events that they might have scheduled. And then if you were willing and able, then you could do workshops. So I did some workshops. I did a program as part of an kids art camp. I did a teaching as part of that. There was an organization down the road from the Art Institute that was much like Vernon Immigration Services, and they brought a group of kids. I think they actually came twice to do workshops, and so that was fun, because part of my my pleasure is not just making art, but like sharing that with
Sharing
other
it.
people.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned teaching it. So were you a teacher before?
No, my mom was a teacher, and I swore I would never be a teacher.
But it's in you.
but I learned all those skills
Yeah.
growing up, right?
Yeah.
And when I was young, I was really actively involved in 4-H, and 4-H is a very much learn to do by doing kind of organization, and so that gave me all kinds of skills to do all kinds of things. So yeah, it's and I really do love teaching. So as funny as it is to say that I didn't want to be a teacher, I really am a teacher in many ways.
I think so. And there's something, I'm jumping, but
Yeah.
I did see something about a puzzle that you created with a group of school kids in Vernon.
Yeah, so one of my favorite things to do is go into a school and do an art project with the whole school, where every kid gets to make something, and everybody's included. There's no, just the best art gets hung. So where every kid can participate. So I started when my kids were in elementary school, and West Vernon School was celebrating a 40th anniversary. And so every kid in the school got to do something we had 8 4x8 sheets of plywood on the front of the school, and every kid got to paint on that, and then it got mounted up. So that was the first one. And then I did a whole school teaching thing with printmaking, with jelly printmaking at Armstrong Elementary School. And then that turned into doing 2 murals with them, also whole school things. One of them, the kids did self-portraits. So that was not exactly, that's not my best strength. And that was not exactly how originally we had planned it. But that's what it morphed into.
Right.
So,
and I love that about you, that you say yes to things. It seems like you jump into things that might be scary or not your thing. So
a bit challenging.
Yeah.
Up for a challenge. So the kids did portraits, and I'm like, okay, how am I going to make this so they're not afraid to do a portrait? Because to try to do a portrait of yourself is kind of a scary thing. So I'm like, okay, let's just map our faces. So we treated it like a map. We had an oval, and then we found on the map where the eyes went and where the nose went. And it actually, it was a fabulous experience, because it's so interesting to see how kids see themselves, and it might be very different from how you see them.
Yeah.
But it was fabulous. So that got done.
Is that mural still up?
It is. It's on the exterior of Armstrong Elementary School.
I'll check it.
And and then there was a second one that we did because they were celebrating their 100th anniversary, so then and now, and that one's on the inside of the school, and takes up a wall at the end of a stairwell, and it was done there. And then I had a friend. Oh, I forgot one. I did a one at Barstow School, the entrance of Barstow School too.
Oh, our cameraman here went to Barstow.
Were you there when we did the belonging and becoming and belonging mural?
When would you have done
With Wendy Briggs was the principal, and we did all the stuff that's on the entryway. So
Wendy was your principal.
So we did, for some kids did clay, and some kids did wire, and some kids did weaving, and
oh yeah, of course,
yeah,
I remember.
Yeah, so we did all that because
and for the viewers, because the reason why I know that Bowen went to Barstow Elementary School is because I'm Bowen's mom.
So now the secret's out.
Now the secret's out. So I can drop little bombs every once in a while.
But that's one of the things I love about being a creative. So with that project, the original plan was to do great big fiber hanging pieces. But we found out that due to insurance and fire sprinklers, we couldn't do it. So it became all these different things, and it actually turned into a better project because of that. So then fast forward, Wendy is now the principal down in Peachland. So then I did a mural down in Peachland. It was an interior mural with all the kids, same thing, based on the 13-month Indigenous calendar and the seasons. So that, and then the puzzle one that you had asked about was at Silver Star
I don't know how I missed all these other ones. I think you need a website just dedicated to all these other school projects you've been involved in.
Well, it's probably something that I could fill a couple pages with, but so the puzzle one was also the same ideas, how we all fit together, we're interconnected. And so how that one came about is I have friends that are very handy with woodworking, and they belong to something in Vernon called Men's Shed. And so I knew this and I knew them. And so I'm like, hey, so one day I went to Windsor Plywood. And at Windsor Plywood, they had this fabulous plexiglass template to use with a router. Well, that solves a problem because that was one of my problems. How am I going to create a template?
Yeah.
So here there was a template. It was about 9 by 9 inches, so it was a nice size. And so my two friends, they helped me cut it out. So Jack and Brian helped me cut them out.
And they were pretty big pieces.
Yeah, so they were like 9 by 9, and Tolko donated the wood. And so they donated the plywood. And so Silver Star School organized it, and then I went in and taught the kids. So that was acrylic painting on wood. So, and the only guidance that we gave the students was that each class had to pick a color. That was their background color. And a word. So the word tied in with their school words, community words, kindness, respect, unity. I can't remember what all the other words were. But so each class had that overarching word and a color. And that's all. And then the rest was directed by the kids and by the teacher of the classroom. And so in the end, we have this grand puzzle that was assembled in the library, and it covers 2 walls of the library, wraps around the corner. And the classes are not necessarily hung together, but just kind of a collection, an eclectic mix of all the different things that the kids created.
I need a map
Yeah,
of all these different mural,
I could do
I'll have to
that.
drive to each one, but I think that would
Yeah.
be really cool.
Yeah, and
Probably have to sign in at the office.
yeah, I was going to say we'll have to get permission from the school district and set it up through them.
I know Wendy, so I can
Yeah.
get through that one.
Yeah, you can see those
Yeah.
for sure.
Well,
yeah.
thanks for explaining a bit more about that. Yeah, your teaching time with
Yeah.
kids, and so then I'm thinking, okay, back to Texas, and you were explaining about teaching programs to kids when they were coming through the residency program, but then there were these art walks.
Yeah, so how that worked is because there were 21 artists in 16 studios, they would have these first Friday of the month. So I noticed in Texas, and I think more places in the United States.
Well, we used to live in Ohio, and they did have a first Friday in Ohio. And that was a big thing, and everyone participated, and it was so great to bring community together. So carry on.
Yeah, so that's what they did in Amarillo.
Yeah.
And so it was such a fabulous experience. I thought, what a great idea, and what, awareness to the community and participation and just fun.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, when I came back, I'm like, I'm going to start that here. I'm going to open my studio the first Friday of every month.
Yeah.
And I'll just send out invitations to people I know or put it out there and people can come.
So you came back in 2023.
So I was the residency was from April to the end of June, but I actually stayed into July a bit. And then, so I was back here by the end of July.
Okay, so end of July, you've just come back from this adventure in Texas. And are you the type of person that is just gung-ho and I'm going to start this first Friday next month? And you're already creating it and scheduling it and getting in touch with everyone? Or were you thinking about it? And
yeah, no, I thought about it. I think it was September or October I actually first did it.
Yeah.
And it was more like I wanted to share what I had done and what I had learned and kind of engage with the public. And so I've kind of always been about that, about connecting with the community and doing fun things in the community. So I'm like, okay, the first Friday's going to be different here because I don't have a big facility to open up and do that with. But what if it was instead that people came to artist studios? Because I've noticed that people are really curious about your process as an artist, and they want to know kind of how you do things and why you do things and what you do. And so the idea is to open up the studio so people can come and have a look. And so I started out by myself. First I just started myself, and then I'm like, it'd be good if there's a few other artists. So I met with a few other artists. So Mandy Ehrman and Jerry Marchand, the three of us got together and kind of had a core group and kind of set things up and developed a logo and a graphic so that people could identify it, and then started out. And so the idea is that it's kind of a loosely organized group in the sense that it's not mandated what hours you're open. The only thing that's for sure always is the first Friday. So like this one on Friday is as earliest it could possibly be because it's the 1st of November.
Yeah.
The first Friday is the 1st of November. So this time there's 8 artists that are involved. And so people like Heidi Thompson, who does these fabulous color field kind of paintings, and Deborah Wilson, who does jade carvings and stone carvings, and Julie Oakes, who has Headbones Gallery and does really interesting work of her own. And then self-taught artists like Lisa Nagy, who is having a pop-up at Gallery Vertigo this time, and Jerry Marchand, who does, I'm not going to get the terms right, but he does really intellectual kinds of paintings, and it makes you think. And then myself with the and I'm missing somebody.
I think John Lawrence is on.
And John Lawrence, yes, that's the other one.
I think John lives close by you.
Yeah, he's down on Pleasant Valley Road. So this is the first time John's been part of it. And some of the artists that were there at the beginning for now have work commitments or other commitments that they, for over the winter or for a period of time, can't participate. But it's kind of flexible that way too. It's nice if people can commit ongoing. That's great. But that's not to say that's the only way it can work. So yeah, so I'm really looking forward to this, and I really love people to come and hang out in my studio.
Maybe this is a good time for us to wrap this part of our live stream up, because we're going to also tour your studio after. And so perhaps you could just say where people can go to find out more information about the art. And we're calling them First Friday Art Stroll or Art Walk, because Vernon is the trail capital of BC, over 300 kilometers of trails. And that's just a starting point, because now we have this art trail, and that's going to add another 100 kilometers at least.
Yeah, and we're in negotiations about that at the moment.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Was I?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's all good, because that's one of the things that people are like, this isn't really a studio stroll, because you can't walk to it. So really, it has to change anyway. So art trail seems fine to me. Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
So if anyone out there in the streaming world that's watching today wants to know more about it.
Yeah. So there's the Facebook page currently is this very big long name, First Friday Art Studio Stroll Vernon. So that's the Facebook one. We also have set up a website though that is just First Friday Okanagan. And so you can go to the website. It tells you a little bit about it. It has a members gallery, so you can see the different artists and their work. And it's got a map. So if you're local and you want to come see the studios, then you can come and visit. And the artists love to have you come and visit their studios, open their studios to you. Come into my parlor, said the spider to the fly. So this is where it all begins, in the darkroom. So you have to have a red light or a way of preventing light from exposing things before you start, because with a cyanotype, your fabric has been pre-treated and it's reactive to light. So usually we would take this outside into the sunshine, but today is not that kind of day, and it's late in the day. So I've created kind of a fake sunshine with some UV light over here with my little plant
because
growing.
You're a creative woman who is free-flowing.
Yes, and so we're going to do this. So we're going to go back out into my studio. I'm going to pop this under here and turn on the lights. So if this was a nice day, it would be going outside. This funny little gadget that I've also got under here is a light meter. And so it's just going to tell us how much light is getting onto this, which is none at the moment because I need to turn this on, which is here. So it's going to just, it's going to just do its thing, and we'll come back to it in a while. So
in the meantime, we can tour this beautiful studio and see all your creations.
I can never remember the name of the chemical, so I always have to look at the bottles. So part A is potassium ferrocyanide, and part B is ferric ammonium citrate. And these are produced by Jacquard Company, and there's other companies that produce them as well.
Are they pretty pricey or?
probably about, these are not, as a set, not that expensive, maybe $25, something like that. And so they come with just powder in them, and you have to add the water and mix the chemicals.
Right.
So when you're
Some
making a
science.
cyanotype, you take an equal amount of part A and part B and mix them together. Then they're light sensitive. Then you need to use your darkroom to apply it to your fabric.
Once
paper.
you mix them together, how much time do you have?
Yeah, as long as you're in a dark room, it doesn't matter
Okay.
so much. It's more, you just don't want to put them out in the sunshine, because as soon as you put them in the sunshine, they start to develop. So I started this whole process into these by talking about denim wood. In the early 2000s, I wanted to find a process to talk about denim wood. So I went out to Tolko, shot some photography, took it into the darkroom. I was at university at the time, and produced a series of work about the pine beetle, which was producing denim wood.
Okay,
So-
I didn't know that this is what it's called, denim wood. Once
Yeah.
the pine beetle does its mess, then
Yeah, it's actually the tree trying to defend itself, and it produces a stain in the wood, and then it's called denim wood.
denim wood. And
Yeah.
it's actually very beautiful. I think Potter, Bob Kingsmill's wife, Marianne, I believe her whole studio, her printing studio is made from that.
Yeah,
pine
it's
beetle wood.
amazing. Yeah, so I started with photography and created big transparencies to do those pieces. And then as I came into my home studio, I didn't have that resource. So you can just use botanicals. And so these are botanicals, and wherever they turned this beautiful blue, the sun hit it. Wherever it was blocked by the leaves or the grass or whatever, then it stays white or light.
These are stunning. And it feels like I'm in nature in these ones. They don't feel placed.
No, they're placed only in that I put the branches down, but what happens is always a mystery. So that's one of the things I love about this process is you can plan and prepare, and unless you're using like a photographic, like a transparency or a painting, you really don't know how it's going to turn out. So this is a rubbing that I did on a piece of mylar off the tree. So the tree trunks I rubbed, like you rub with a pencil, but I used a black oil pastel, and that's how I did that.
Beautiful.
So botanicals can be done. I talked about wearable art, so I've done some bags with straight up botanicals. I've done hats and using stencils and using feathers. I love this one because look at the detail, and that's just exactly the way the sun and the feathers produced it. So there's if you get it right, you can get that amount of detail.
Do you think that's a hawk's feather?
I'm not sure what it is, but I'm sure somebody could tell me because I don't know feathers well enough. And then I started going, okay, so what would happen if I took the botanicals and I started combining them with other things? So I took big pieces of glass and drew and painted on the glass. So in this piece, you've got the botanicals, so the fireweed tight against the fabric, which makes it the whitest. Then you have this big piece of glass that I drew and painted on. Over top of the botanicals to hold them up. And then I stood a bicycle in front of that. And because the sun was super bright that day, the shadow of the bicycle also blocked the light, but it's kind of diffused, so you can still see some of the other things through it. So that actually has, I started playing around with, like, okay, what happens if we incorporate this or that, or try this or that?
Oh, it's fun to play.
It very much is. And so with doing that, so this is a piece that I did plein air this year at the rail trail. And so here's an example of how this works. So that's the finished piece in the blue and white. And this is the drawing that I did. And I'm going to just take this dark background away so you can see it against the white. So that's the painting that I did to produce the artwork. So the painting was done with black acrylic and one of the paints is called Mishus Iron Oxide. I just love the way it sounds. So, but it's got minerals in it, so it makes it really intense to block the light. So that's, with both the bicycle one and with this one, it was a drawing on glass that helped to create the image. And then there's the whole adventure of doing something called a wet cyanotype, which means that you leave the chemicals wet, You don't dry it first. You add other things in. So these three little guys were all done as wet cyanotypes. And also this one over here, I think I'll bring out so you can see it a bit better. So what happens is when the chemical is wet, you can add in, so this one, I think there was turmeric and ground sumac and coffee grounds and soap bubbles, and I don't remember what all else. But it takes a very long time. So if an exposure on a hot sunny day of of one of these other ones is say 5 minutes, the wet cyanotypes take 4 to 6 hours, let's say. So you leave them out, you really don't know what's going to happen to them, and but you can get those other kind of colors coming in because you can introduce other things into the mix. So that's how those are created, and that's kind of a fun thing to do. And because my artwork, the cyanotypes, are kind of one-offs, I've created art cards. So I have a collection of art cards. So
yeah, they are very unique. I've never met anyone else who's ever done this kind of art, and for me, I'm just learning about it for the first time. So do you know of other artists that are close by, like in the Okanagan, that are doing this? Or
I do have a friend, Judy Templeton, had done some. She's a printmaker, and so she had done some. She moved down from Fort St. John, and so we did some cyanotypes together. And so, but not at the scale that I don't know other people.
But you've been teaching a lot of young children.
Yes.
So who knows?
That's right. And when I was in Texas, just as I was getting ready to leave, I did meet a couple of cyanotype artists who lived like a couple hours away, and so I hadn't met them at the beginning, but I did meet them as I was leaving. And so one of them was teaching at a college, so I'm sure that there's going to be.
Of course, yeah.
And kind of, I think during COVID too, a lot of people were stuck at home and wanted to find something they could do. And this is something you can do. So if you want to do a really simple version of it, you can go, like in Vernon, we've got Teach and Learn. They call them solar papers, or you can go online and buy little solar papers, and you can test it out on a small version. Or you can go to Opus in Kelowna and buy the larger prepared fabric. And it's a little bit more pricey, but it's a bigger size, 8.5 by 11, so you can produce that. And then you don't have to mix up the chemicals and do all that part. It comes already dry, already like in a special foil sealed bag, so that you don't expose it to light. But you don't have to mess with chemicals. So that's kind of fun. Yeah, so then this piece was part of a show that I did. It was called The Modern Elder. And so there was a traveling show that went around BC to quite a few different locations. And I think, I can't remember how many artists there were, maybe 14, something like that. And so that show traveled around and was exhibited in different galleries. And then, then we have, like I was talking about,
lampshades.
The lampshades. So here's something, how these things happen. I went to an art garage sale at the art center, and my friend had purchased these lampshades that were white, and you could assemble them, but she hadn't done anything with them. So I bought them at the garage sale, and I brought them home, and I did cyanotypes on them. So there's an artist out of the UK that does just lampshades, and she does a beautiful job. And that's kind of what inspired me to try that. So
They're beautiful.
Yeah, and then just the other things that I do, so the wearable kind of art, like the tablecloths, and then scarves, tea towels, all kinds of pillows. This year I ventured into pillows because I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have a piece on your wall and then a piece on your couch or chair or
nice
whatever.
White linen couch with a pop of denim blue.
Yeah, so all of these things, and so just like I say, you just kind of experiment. This one is non-traditional colors because it is on yellow fabric. So like the pillows are on colored fabric, which is why there's color in them. This was on a colored bright yellowy green fabric. And so when I put the cyanotype chemicals on it, it turned more green, or has more greens in it than just blue. So, and that was a wet cyanotype, so that took a long time too. It was out in the sun for a long time. And it also had some turmeric in it and other things in it, so that probably also brought out that yellow that you wouldn't have ordinarily.
It's very pretty.
Yeah, so we can go have a look at how our exposure is going along over here, see how things are going.
Do we have another poem or saying?
And
Or...
then they're saying no.
No.
Starlight, star bright.
Oh, and action.
Starlight, star bright. Oh no, it's not a star. It's just a light. But yeah, so we're about halfway to where we would ordinarily do this. But I think we're going to see if we can get something happening anyways. I'm just going to come over to the sink because you need to have water. So that's one of the things when you're doing cyanotypes. You need to have a source of water. I'm just going to move this out of the way and put this. So I have these lovely tubs, indispensable. And you just fill it with water because when you are done exposing the cyanotype, then you want to bring it and wash out any chemical that hasn't developed and that is still in the paper or the fabric, so that it doesn't continue to develop.
Right. And Christine was telling me that this beautiful studio space was actually slated to just be filled in with dirt.
True. It was supposed to be cement walls around it with filled in with dirt. So we're gonna see if we have any. It might be a very faint image because it should be like twice as much light as usual. So you can take this off, and when you lift this up, you can see. Wow. So where that is light colored, it's going to become white. And you can see the water's turning a little bit green. So that's just the chemical coming out of there. And I'm going to just shut all these things off because we don't need them to be going on. There we go. Yeah, so this is going to be a wimpy cyanotype.
So this fabric is blue.
The fabric is white to start with.
Oh, it was white and it was the chemical.
And then the chemicals. So when I mix the chemicals together and paint it on a piece of fabric, it's lime green. And so then as it's out in the sun and it starts to develop, it changes, it goes through this transition from lime green into kind of a duller green, into a gray blue, into kind of a tan blue gray. So when you get to that point, you know it's done. So for years and years, I didn't have the light meter. I just looked at the stuff and said, okay, it looks like this is done, right? And it worked. So you don't need to have a light meter to do this at all.
Right.
You can just, use your judgment. Mm-hmm. So you can see the water's green. So how you can tell if you've got all the chemical out of here, so we dump out this water. Sorry, you're not able to see this very well. There. See it a little better now? And you can see it's a very soft blue color. Mm-hmm. And that is because you didn't expose it for very long, right? So it's about a third maybe of strength to what ordinarily would happen. So you can see it's just a very, very soft blue. So people ask me sometimes, like, how come this one's darker and how come that one's lighter? And sometimes it's not just how long it's in the light, but the strength of the light. So on a hot sunny day, you're in real danger of things disappearing. So this piece behind me, I almost lost because I left it out in the sun too long. So you can see the fireweed, but you can see that some of it's starting to be like you're hardly seeing it. Mm-hmm. And so that's what happened with that one. That one's out almost.
And actually, that's what I like about it.
Yeah.
So it can be a happy accident sometimes as well.
That's right. So yeah.
And it's a heart shape. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah. And so that's the challenge is each one is going to be its own thing, and it's a bit serendipity. You cannot always predict what it's going to be in the end. So yesterday I was fooling around with some stuff, and look at the funny color this one is. Here, I'll bring it out so you can see it. But look at the funny color this one is.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, oh, well, I'm not sure. It's got like some almost eco-print kind of feel to it.
Right. I can imagine, because I like stitching, embroidery, I can imagine how much fun it would be to have a piece like this and then just play with stitching around it. Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Yeah, so now the last step in our cyanotype is the lovely, you need a little hydrogen peroxide. So what the hydrogen peroxide does, Oh. I have things like dried and pressed flowers and things all over. So if anybody ever, wondered what they did with old phone books, old catalogs.
Yeah, those were the days.
Well, because I've collected.
Yeah,
things
you've
in
got
them.
them pressed inside.
Yeah, so that,
of course.
to keep them so that there's the daisy page.
Yeah.
Or a daisy page, right?
Beautiful. Yeah. There's still a practical use for.
Yeah.
Well, that's a U line, but phone books.
Yeah.
Right? Haven't
Well,
seen one of those for a
Phone
while.
books aren't thick enough now.
So
to
should
even
I
do
bring
that.
things like that over to your house, to your studio?
Yeah, I can always use them, right?
A flower press.
Okay, so this last step is if you're doing with photo papers, they don't tell you this in the photo paper stuff. And you can see I very carefully measured that amount. Exactly the right amount.
Good. I like this kind of science.
Yeah.
Splash of this, splash of that.
Yeah. And so when I put this in here with the kids, this is where the most fun is because it will actually darken up the image. So in this case, it didn't darken it very much because let's put this, sorry, get this down here. Put it over here so you can actually, so it does darken it up.
Yeah.
And it makes it more intense. So that's like the final step. And like I say, that's the wimpiest cyanotype I've done in a while because it really doesn't have very much contrast and it really doesn't have very intense
But
color.
you took us through the steps.
That's right. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so you know that that can happen. Like for every piece you see like this, there may have been 2 or 3 pieces like that were fails.
Right.
Right?
So what do you do with your fails?
Well, up till now, I've been kind of just hanging on to some of them. But most of them, if they're really not good, I just recoat it
Yeah.
and do it again.
I was wondering, you can just, you
Yeah,
can just do
and
it again.
what happens though is whatever you did at the bottom comes through. So you have to be aware that that's going to happen. And so it may or may not turn out the way you want.
Right.
And if it's actually totally a disaster and you just hate it, there's the garbage can.
There's the garbage can. Wonderful. Thank you for walking us through those steps.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, Christine Kashuba, artist, facilitator, educator, you've taught us a lot today. And also really knowledgeable, amazing human.
Oh,
I'm so grateful for all of your stories and your sharing today. And one more time for the viewers about the first Fridays.
Yeah, so it's every first Friday of the month, and there's always going to be a group of artists that are going to open their studios and really want you to come visit. So take the opportunity and get to know your local artists and come visit their studios.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see you again. This is Bowen and Mimi and Bowen. TELUS Story Hive live streaming, signing off for today, and we'll see everyone another time.